In 2008, I was driving from New Orleans, Louisiana to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me, 22 female, and my year-old pit bull in a 14-foot U-Haul truck with everything I owned crammed into the back, a fancy flip phone, and my printout MapQuest directions. I think the first smartphones actually came out around that time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was also much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant U-Haul was getting really low on gas. Just when I'm starting to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I see a small town coming up. I pull into this town, and it is tiny. I was so worried about other things that I never did pay attention to the name of the town. But there were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I go gas up, and I'm ready to get back on the road. Except, I cannot for the life of me find my way back to the highway. I circle the town about 4 times, and I start getting so frustrated because this is such a tiny town. How the heck can I not find my way out? I can literally see the highway, but can't get to it. I returned to the gas station to ask for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. When I enter for directions, there's a skinny, nondescript guy who has black hair hanging down in front of his eyes that looks like it could use a good wash. He's not too creepy looking, but a little rude. He never really met my eyes. He was looking down at a magazine. He gives me directions that don't sound right at all. He's telling me to take a road that will get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I am dumbfounded. Then I point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town. Why so far back to get to the highway? I can literally see it from the town. He is so casual, almost like I'm just an annoyance and can follow his directions or not. Why should he care? He gives me some explanation about the road curving around that just doesn't make any sense. He still doesn't look at me and says, "Whatever, I gave you your directions," and waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I get into the truck, and as soon as I put the key into the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that, no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I didn't know what, but I knew right then and there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet this was the only store in this little town, and short of knocking on doors, no thank you, there was no one else to ask for directions. I decided I didn't give a shit if this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my way out, even if it took all damn night. Then a big red beater of a pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulls up and disgorged the quintessential Texan man. Huge, husky, and in a flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of my truck and I approached him quickly. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being. Or at least I was hoping I did. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh and very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin curve turnoff right at the end of the small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He said it often confused travelers because it was so hard to see. They really need to put up signs. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles was it back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. "Miles, miss? I'd say it's a quarter mile at most. You can see the highway right from here." At this point, I couldn't help it. I had to know. What happens if I drive? And I gave him the directions the man in the store had given me. Texas looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about this route. It was pretty far out and usually only locals know about it. So I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes and then asked what the attendant looked like and if I had a map of the state. Nope, just MapQuest, which wasn't helpful in this situation. He goes to his truck and grabs a raggedy local map from his glove box. Spreading it out for me, he traces the route I describe. The way the man from the gas station had told me to go led away from the town, away from the interstate, and led me to seemingly the middle of nowhere. Texas told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me that it was nothing but some junked cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics. And these were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. And the clerk was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in Texas' eyes as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts, and he told me to be careful traveling out there. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in back of my U-Haul or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully I didn't have to find out. Oh, and I learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. Thank you, random Texas stranger. You really saved my ass, and I will always remember you with tons of love. Sorry I didn't ask for your name. You're forever Texas to me now. I'm 20 years old, and I work at my town's local Ikea in Texas. Since I don't go to school during the daytime, my boss put me on an overnight shift after the store closed at 11 p.m. This means I was working from 11 o'clock to roughly about 1 a.m. I was basically a janitor, going around the store, mopping the floor, and cleaning and tidying whatever people used to touch or sit in around the furniture and concept rooms throughout the day. Given that IKEA was a supercenter, there would still be a number of employees working during after hours. But for some reason that night, I was one of only 2 other people going around the store to clean. It was around midnight, and I was dusting off some of the shelves in one of the concept living rooms when I heard someone's footsteps echoing in the distance behind me. This was odd, as the store was closed over an hour ago, and no one was supposed to be in the store. I brushed it off as it was probably a coworker, Carlos, going around and doing his part. Though it would be somewhat unusual for him to do that, given that we basically never see each other while we're cleaning because the store is so big, and we're assigned to clean our own areas of the store each time. I brushed it off, and some time had passed. I'd eventually made my way to the children's bed section of the store. It wasn't my favorite part of the store because it always was so badly lit from the broken lamps overhead. I was making the beds when I noticed a movement in the far corner of my field of vision. It was faint, like something ducking under one of the beds. I started to get pretty anxious by this point because I just remembered the footsteps from earlier and started connecting the dots. Something was definitely off, and I realized that there's a high chance I'm not alone in this part of the store. I looked around, but obviously nothing. As much as my suspicions, I started to wonder if my mind just made up what I just saw. A couple minutes passed, and I was still very much on guard. That's when I heard it. A plastic cup hit the floor about a block away. It came from one of the kitchen rooms in the kitchen section, which was the last section I had to clean before I was done for the night. I stopped what I was doing and looked in the direction of the sound. All I saw was a cup in the middle of the alleyway. That made it real. My fight or flight started kicking in pretty intensely at this point as I tried to make sense of what was going on. I started to think that someone was messing with me. Either my coworker or some random kids were playing some sort of prank on me. However, my coworker Carlos is not the type to joke around, and we barely talk either way. Though I figured whoever was doing this was trying to lure me in towards the cup. I decided to call out Carlos's name. Nothing. I told him if it was a prank, he should stop right now. During that moment, I was almost practically sure it was a joke, and I walked towards the cup to pick it up. Once I was there, though, I noticed that one of the cupboards underneath the sink from the concept kitchen was slightly left open. My imagination was running wild at this moment, so I slowly walked towards the cupboard, and I opened it completely to see if anyone was inside. That's when I saw it. A sickly-looking man staring right at me. I immediately backed off a couple feet, and he was still staring right at me, with these creepy wide eyes and sickly smile. He wasn't saying anything, just making very creepy eye contact with me, which was enough for me, and I ran to the nearest exit as fast as I could, leaving all my cleaning equipment behind. I went home, and I tried my best to forget about what just happened, but I couldn't get that image of that creepy face out of my head. The next day, I called my boss to tell him what happened the night before, and he was obviously taken aback and told me he was going to check that area for signs of someone being there. He called me back later in the day to tell me that they found a bag of chips and cinnamon roll boxes in the cupboard, but nothing else. Ever since, I've kept working there, and we never again found traces of anyone living in the store. Even though I'm pretty much over it now, and I've come to realize it was probably a homeless man, I still can't get that haunting image of his creepy face out of my head, nor can I make sense of that cup falling over for no reason.